I share those because if you were to choose a slogan for your life, a motto, a mantra for your life, what would it be? What do you want to be known for? What do you want people to say and know about you? When your life here is over, what are they going to say about you? So I share Faith in Action, God in Motion with you. When we started this series, I said this was my father's life slogan. He lived by this. This is what drove his life, his ministry, his family, his leadership. Faith in Action, God in Motion. Everyone that knew him really knew this slogan. But what a lot of people did not know is that he had a second slogan. And by the way, he passed away about almost exactly a year ago this week, still living in Africa. But he had a second slogan. And those of us that heard him preach 500 or 1,000 times, we knew this slogan well too. It's this: give me the giants. That one he loved to say, give me the giants. He was never afraid of something big, something challenging. And he would always say, give me the giants. And that slogan comes from Joshua chapter 14. So open your Bibles. I'm going to start in verse 10, and we read this. The people of Judah came to Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb spoke. Moses solemnly promised me the land of Canaan on which you were just walking. He said, it will be your grant of land and that of your descendants forever. He says, today I am 85 years old. I'm as strong today as I was when Moses sent me on that journey. And I can still travel and fight as well as I could then. This guy's like Clint Eastwood on Red Bull. He's all wound up. 85 and he's ready to fight. So give me the mountain, Hebron, that the Lord promised me. You yourself heard the report that the Anakim, that's the giants, were there with their great fortress cities. If God goes with me, I will drive them out, just as God said. So here is Caleb at 85 years old saying, God, give me a mountain. And not just any mountain, but give me a mountain with giants on it. I think the mountains and the giants in this text, I feel like they represent the resistance that all of us face in life. I think everyone who's ever tried to do anything significant, we've all faced resistance. Anyone who has a pulse, you've faced resistance. And so I'm going to use that phrase a lot today, this idea of resistance. But just so that we're all on the same page as we start, let me describe what resistance is. Resistance, for example, you know resistance if you've ever purchased an elliptical machine, right? Because now it's in your bedroom and you use it as a clothes hanger, or it's in your garage collecting dust. But you know resistance if you've ever talked about or dreamed about becoming a doctor or becoming a school teacher. You know resistance if you've ever planned to play a guitar or hope to learn an instrument. You know resistance is if you ever wanted to finish your degree, go back to college or get a master's degree so you can teach at Justice College. You know resistance. You know resistance if you've ever tried to do something new or entrepreneurial. Then you face resistance. We all have. And so when you read this story of the people of Israel, going back to when Moses first starts taking them out of Egypt, we see resistance. God says, Moses, I need you to lead my people. And Moses says, not me, God. Use Aaron. That's resistance. Jesus tells a resistance story. In Matthew 25, he talks about a leader who gives 3 people finances to do work with. And one of them buries it in the ground, buries his talent. That's resistance. I think there's 2 kinds of resistance. They come in 2 forms. I'm going to start with this one. First, what I'll describe as external resistance, resistance from people around us. And I think the giants in our story, the Anakim, are a picture of that. So let's go back to our text, and I'm going to read from the NIV this time, verse 8. And Caleb says, I brought Moses back a report according to my convictions. But now he throws his friends under the bus. But my fellow Israelites who went up with me made the hearts of the people melt in fear. Why was that? Because they came back and all they could talk about were the giants. It was resistance. I, however, followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. But I just want to remind us all of this, that whenever you try to do something like this, take a new land, You will have giants in the land who are opposing you, who are in your way. And the giants represent, the Anakim represent the giants in your land. There's a place that God wants you to be. There's something he wants you to do. And there's usually, often, almost always someone standing in the way trying to stop you. And isn't it true that whenever we try to do something new or important or big, people start to criticize us and they start to stand in our way like the Anakim giants? So over this series through Joshua, I've been retelling my father's story of starting 3 universities in Africa. And the journey started back in the mid-70s when he was given some land in Liberia. And so now he needed to raise $500,000 to build a campus before he had his first student. So we came back to the United States. And his plan was to go to his denomination's biggest church and meet with the head of the denomination and ask that they finance this project and they give him the funds and the faculty. So he made this appointment with the pastor of the largest church, most affluent church in the denomination, and this pastor was also the leader of the denomination. And he meets with him and he shares his vision of colleges in Africa, raising up African leaders to lead their governments and to lead in business and education and in the church. And he's so passionate. He shares this vision with his pastor and he listens for a while and then he says, "Hey, Jack, I knew you were coming in for this meeting. We've already met and talked about it. And we've decided you don't have enough experience." And so the answer is no. The denomination will not be behind you. Our church will not be behind you. We will not give you any funding or resources or faculty. And that was it. And he thought, well, there's my plan. My plan has just gone out the window. What do I do now? And it was just so happened that the next week he had a speaking engagement in a small Presbyterian church in Escambia County, Florida. And he preaches there. It's a small rural church, and he doesn't expect much, so he doesn't ask really for anything. He just preaches and shares his vision of starting colleges in Africa. And at the end of the service, a plumber came, and I wish I had the plumber's name, and my mother just retold me this story to me when she was home for Christmas. The plumber finds him after the service and said, "Jack," he said, "I have a plan for building your college." He says, "What is it?" And he says, "Here's what you're going to do." He said, "You said you need 22 buildings, right?" He said, "So what you're going to do is you're going to find 22 churches that will each pay for one building, but you'll give them 3 years because you said the buildings only cost about $15,000 each. That's $5,000 a year. In 3 years, you'll have the whole thing paid for." And my dad says, "Come the dawn. That's the best idea ever." And then this plumber says, "I lead our missions committee. We'll take the first building. You just need 21 more now." And that's what he did. In 6 months, he had all 22 buildings. You know, sometimes we think that person with all the resources and all the power, we think they're in control of our lives, and they're not. Those kinds of giants, you don't need in your life. You don't need to listen to them because God has a bigger plan. They don't believe in you. They don't know what God can do through you. They don't know the burning passion he's put in your hearts. They don't know that God can take your small efforts and in his power make it great. And we can miss that. Why do we face resistance from others? Think about this with me. I think when we share something that's new or novel or daring, it creates disequilibration in people. It disturbs them, and they don't like it. They've never heard this before. And then some of those people are envious and jealous. They know you won't need them so much anymore, and so they start to rain on your parade and on your plans, and they envy what God has put in your hearts, and they start to doubt you. And if you think about it, anyone in this world, in this life, that does anything big or significance will always tell you about the people that shot them down first, right? For example, maybe you've heard of this band, the Beatles. So in 1962, they were a small pub band in England. And then a Decca record rep had been up in a pub, heard them play. And Decca Records was the largest label in London at the time. So he invites them down to their studios. They say the drive should have been 4 or 5 hours. It took them 10 because they got lost in the rain. They show up and they take them in a studio and they have them play a 15-song set. That's a long set. And they brought in several executives to listen to them. At the end of the session, the executives said, "First of all, A, we don't like your music. B, we feel guitar bands are dying. And 3, we don't see this Beatle thing ever being well known anywhere in the world. And so they showed him to the door and let him leave, and EMI signed him, EMI, and made billions off the Beatles. But they had to endure the critics first. You will always have that kind of opposition. I don't know if you know the name Fred Smith. Fred Smith was a Yale student. He was a business econ major, and he was assigned a paper, and he writes a paper, and he titles it Overnight Mail Delivery. And at the bottom of his paper, the professor gives him a C, and he says, and he writes this note, in order to earn a grade better than a C, the idea must be feasible. Well, Fred Smith left Yale, took the paper, and started this small company called FedEx. Maybe you know them. and has made billions. But we'll all have those people who think we deserve a C when it was an A++ paper. Do you know the name William Young? William Young is a godly man and a writer. And he wrote a book titled The Shack. And he started looking for literary agents to represent him. The agent said, this is poorly written, it will never be published. He tried meeting with publishers, they wouldn't meet with him. Everyone told him, William Young, you need to find a different calling, you're not a writer. But William thought he had written something special, something God wanted him to write. So he paid a printer himself to print books. Then he loaded up the trunk of his car and started driving the west coast of California, Oregon, Washington, stopping at mom and pop bookstores, selling half a dozen books at a time. Do you know how many books William Young ended up selling? 20 million books. And no one ever did get to publish it except himself. The lesson is stop listening to the critics, because really the only person that matters, the only one that matters is your Father in heaven. I have a friend who's a musician. His name is Zach Lind, and we were together one night hanging out, and we were talking about creativity. And he said, you know what, Plumber? He said, kids, children, they're never afraid to create. Paint, draw, make music. They're not afraid. Do you know why they're not afraid? He said, because whatever they create, kids know their parents and grandparents will only rain down praise on them. And I share that because it's just like that with your Father in heaven. That when you step out to do something new, creative, bold, innovative, entrepreneurial, he will only rain down praise, and his voice is the only one that matters, isn't it? So I said we have 2 forms of resistance. We've talked about external resistance. The second form of resistance I'll describe as internal resistance. This, I think, the mountains in our story, this Mount Hebron represents, because these mountains form on the inside. We look at something that we know God is calling us to do, and we think, oh, that just feels so big. I cannot do it. It's so much work, or I've never done that before. And we can become, on the inside, our own worst critic. And we start thinking, what if I fail? What will people say? Or maybe I'm too old, or maybe I'll do this tomorrow. I'm out of shape. I can't climb the mountain today. But that's internal resistance speaking. I think we encounter internal resistance every time we try to do something big, every time we try to grow spiritually. Anything that involves spiritual growth and maturity, we encounter resistance. Every time we try to do something to bring justice or compassion to this world, to feed the homeless, for example, or to stop racism, we feel resistance. That's all on the inside. And I would add to that, any effort for tighter abs, you will encounter resistance. That's just one side note. But resistance often comes in the form of procrastination, doesn't it? We don't say, I'm not going to write the movie script. We simply say, I'm going to write the movie script tomorrow. and here's the thing. You can end resistance. You can stop resistance at any moment. And that moment is when you sit down with your laptop and you write these words, the night was dark and sultry. Boom, you're a writer. You're off and running now. But you can end resistance on your own. Resistance also comes in the form of comfort and ease. Because we don't want hard work. Even on the inside, when we're honest, we're like, oh, that's a bigger job than I want. Thank you, God. How about Aaron, like Moses said, send somebody else. But resistance, like I said, it can be overcome. And you have to realize that resistance, it's not all bad, is it? Because resistance is a sign that what you're about to do is big, important, meaningful. If there was no resistance, maybe you wouldn't need God in the first place. But because you're facing resistance, now you need God to show up. All right, so if resistance is there in our lives, how do we overcome resistance? I want to start with this. Say to God, give me the giants. Take on the giants. God, give me the giants. Let's go back to our text. I want to pick up in verse 12, and we read, Caleb says, you yourself heard then that the Anakites, the giants, were there, and their cities were large and fortified. But the Lord helping me, I will drive them out. Isn't that the key? You see, Caleb knows that it's not him, but with the Lord helping me, he says, give me the giants because God will help me defeat them. So my question for you is, who are the giants in your life? Who are the ones bullying you, intimidating you, breaking your spirit, demoralizing you, telling you you can't do it? I think it's time for you to name them and take them on. Because maybe this has been your story. Maybe you've had a dream of doing something big or great, but you listened to the giants in your life who were taunting you and stopping you. And you gave up on your dream simply because somebody gave you an F, or somebody cut you during tryouts, or somebody gave the job to somebody else, or somebody said you didn't have enough money, or you don't have enough experience, or you don't have enough education, and so you gave up. Or somebody said, or somebody rejected your application. And I want to say, those people are not the masters of your life. Only God is. You can quit listening to them. Don't let them step on your dreams. When I say who rejected your application, that one strikes close to home for me. Because some of you know that I have a PhD in education, but that wasn't easy to get. What happened is, when I was in my mid-20s, we were living near Chicago, and so I applied to Trinity International University. It's also called Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, and I applied to their PhD program. I had a master's already, and I thought that was the next natural step and for my life. And so I turned in the application, and the department chair called me in for an interview. And it really wasn't much of an interview. It lasted less than 5 minutes. He said, you know, I've read over your application. He said, but Plumber, you're only 26 years old. We've never accepted anyone into the program 26 years old. And he said, I don't think you have enough real life experience, so I'm rejecting your application. And I tried to say, no, hang on, doctor. I just took students to Cuba. I've been through a civil war and a coup d'etat in Africa, and I've lived all over the place. I've had some life experience. And he wouldn't listen. He said the meeting was over. So I left and drove home, and the first thing I did was to pull out my Trinity University handbook. Because I thought maybe no was just a suggestion. I thought maybe there's a way around this rejection. And so I started reading from the front the handbook, and I get to a paragraph titled Visiting Students. I thought, this is interesting. And I thought I read that you could just start taking classes if you wanted to. Maybe I was wrong. So I called the admissions department. I said, can you explain visiting student? Can I just enroll even though I haven't been accepted? And she said, you have a master's degree, right? She said, of course, you can start taking up to 24 units, but it's at your own risk. You may never get accepted to the program. I said, oh, snap, sign me up, sign me up. That's going to work fine. And so she signs me up. And the next week, I show up for class. I've got my laptop, got my textbooks, a binder. I felt like a student again. And I'm walking through the lobby of our department's building, going to my first class. And the department chair is in the lobby, and he sees me. He goes, his face gets all twisted. He says, what are you doing here? I said, I'm going to class. And he said, I already rejected your application. You can't go to class. I said, yes, I can. Visiting student, visiting. He said, and I don't think he even knew it was in the handbook. He almost lost his mind that day. But here's what I decided. I decided I was going to go to class and bust it and show the professors that I could do the work, that I could be in the program. And so I sat on the front row of every class, raised my hand all the time, turned in papers early. One professor needed help building a gazebo, so I went to his house for a Saturday and built a gazebo for him. Some of you are thinking teacher's pet, all right? Sue me, judge me. The next semester, they put the department chair in retirement and brought in a new department chair, a good godly man named Dr. Perry Downs. So I reapplied, and he called me in for an interview. And he said, Palmer, you're 26 years old. Why do you want a PhD? I said, Dr. Downs, my father's founded 3 universities in Africa. I feel like one day soon that God's going to need me to start a college. And I need this PhD in education. And by the end of the meeting, somebody changed their mind. Somebody let me in. And they sent me a letter saying I was accepted. My point is, there will always be those giants, but they aren't the ones who get to decide what you do or you don't do. And I want to challenge you to say, who are they in your life? Because it's time to defeat them. It's time to go straight at them and say, God, give me the giants. The second way to overcome resistance that I wanted to mention this morning is to ask God for a mountain. If you've not been heading in the direction that you know God wants you, ask God for a mountain. This time I want to read from the Darby translation, and it reads like this. This is Caleb again. Now give me this mountain Hebron, of which Jehovah spoke in that day. Anakim are there with great fortified cities. If so, Jehovah shall be with me, and I shall dispossess them, as Jehovah said. I love that line, I will dispossess them. But there's something important here. He talks about this mountain called Hebron. Hebron, for the Hebrew people, for the Jewish people, was a very spiritual place, a very special place. First of all, it was fertile hill country with a lot of water coming through it. You could grow anything there. But Abraham and Sarah settled in Hebron. Isaac and Rebekah settled in Hebron. Jacob and Rachel settled in Hebron. So Caleb knew that God was calling him to this very special place. But, here's the kicker, but he knew it would not be easy. He knew that's where God wanted him, but he knew it was a mountain with giants. And here's the thing, most of us at 85 years old, like Caleb, we would simply ask God for comfort and ease. But Caleb doesn't. He doesn't ask for something manageable or comfortable. He asks for a mountain with giants. Why? Because I think it's through those experiences that God grows us. If you want to grow spiritually, ask God for a mountain. If you want to see him do more in your life, in your family's life, in your business, then ask God. In our church, ask God for a mountain, a challenge so big that the only way it happens is when God is there in it. And like I said, Caleb is 85 years old. He should be asking for comfort and ease. He should be asking for a condo by the beach or a condo in Palm Springs with pickleball courts, something like that, right? But he says, God, give me a mountain. I have this key idea on the screen, and hopefully this sticks with you as you go today. Great leaders ask for a challenge bigger than themselves, one that can make a difference in this world, and they have the faith that God can make it happen. I have that line that I started with, great leaders. I've known a lot of great leaders in my life, but in my opinion, from my vantage, the greatest leader that I've known is my father, Jack Chinchen. And I think just about everything I've learned about leading or trying to lead well, I learned from my father. His story starts like this. When he was 22 years old, he graduated with a business degree from San Jose State University, joined the Navy, became a lieutenant, was sent out on a destroyer during World War II in the Pacific. At 32, he quit his family business because he became a Christian. For the first time in his life, he gave his life to Jesus Christ at 32. Quit his very lucrative family business to go to seminary because he said God wanted him to be a pastor and a missionary. After several years of being a pastor, at 45 years old, you've heard me say he moved our family to the world's thickest rainforest to be a jungle missionary, training up pastors. At 52, he decided to start his first Christian college. Now, at 52, most people start to think about the senior citizen discount at Fry's. You know, it's just a couple of years away. But he starts a college at 52. At 62, he moves across the continent of Africa, 4,000 miles away, and starts a second college in Malawi, which has become the largest college that he started, with over 100 acres of land, more than 100 buildings, with a hospital, with an MBA and a master's program, with a recording studio, with a radio station and a TV station. 2 of his graduates now are members of parliament. That happened at 62. At 72, he goes up to Uganda, Africa, and starts another African Bible college. At 82, he calls all of my brothers and sisters, and he said, Moses climbed Mount Sinai at 80. Caleb climbed Mount Hebron at 85. It's time for me to climb a mountain. I need you to come to Egypt with me. And so when he was 82, we flew to Egypt, and we climbed Mount Sinai. Here we are on the top, and we dragged a couple of grandkids with us. That was at 82. And he kept talking at 82 about the next college that he would build. At 92, he started talking to one of his sons about starting another college, another African Bible college in another country. And this summer, he passed away last year at 94, but this summer, that college opens. It's called Justice College. And thank you. And we're going to do that together here. And I share his story just to encourage you today, because maybe you're only 22 and you're just moving out on your own. Ask God for a mountain. Or maybe you're 42 and you think you're stuck in a rut in your job and you're just putting in your time till you're done. Then ask God for a mountain. Or maybe you're 62 and you're looking at condos at Leisure World. Ask God for a mountain. Or you're 82 and you're shopping for a recliner. Don't do it. Don't do it. Ask God for a mountain. A God-given challenge that when you get there, you know the only way you got to the top is because God was with you. I want to end with this last thought, that some mountains you can't climb alone. And ask God, what mountain is it for me today? But some mountains you can't climb alone. When we read our text, we read this about Caleb. This is verse 9. He said, the land on which your feet walk will be your inheritance, and that of your children forever. And I'll stop there. Because Caleb doesn't take this land by himself. He takes it with his tribe, right? He takes it with his children and his grandchildren and his friends and his family and his tribe. And he marches in, and if you read chapter 15, they defeat Anakim tribe after Anakim king after Anakim king until they take the whole place. But he does it with all of his friends and his family and his tribe with him. At the Grove and through Justice College, there are big mountains ahead of us to climb. I've had this vision for a college since we built this church. We built all of our buildings here to double as college classrooms. So this plan has been in the works for years, but I can't do it by myself. I can't do it just with our staff. But together, this tribe, we can do it. For example, through our graduates and through the people of the Grove, I want us to be a church and a people that care for orphans. But I can't, we have orphans in Haiti. We're taking care of all of them by ourselves. No one else is helping. And in Malawi, we serve with orphans. I can't do that by myself. I've been talking a lot about us becoming modern day abolitionists and ending the sex trade in our community of girls and women, young women. Not just in places like Phuket, Thailand, but right here in Phoenix. But I can't do this alone. It will take a tribe. Or I talk often about embracing people of every race and ending the racism in our country and in our community. But I can't do it alone. This will take a tribe. Or how about this? To care for single mothers. The Bible has a lot to say about, Jesus was passionate about this, to care for single mothers. Do you know that on this property we're purchasing next door, we haven't talked much about the big garage, the big shop with 2 garages, and it has a lift in it to work on cars. And our plan is, when we close on this property, to use that shop every Saturday and invite single mothers in, where volunteers, mechanics here, or wannabe mechanics, renters here, will come in and fix their cars for free. Can we do that together? I think we can. When I was over on the property with the Pratt family and told them we're going to use that shop to help single mothers, they said, we'll leave the lift. How do you like that? Love them. How about this? Share with the poor. Jesus was passionate about this, that we share, that sometimes we live in excess and we can share more. Through our Live Love ministry, every day of the week we are doing this. You know what we've never had is a donation and a distribution center on this land. There are several small warehouses that will immediately begin serving when we close early next year as our Live Love donation and distribution center. We need your help with that. And then finally, I have this. This is like one of my life's mantras. Love like Christ always.